Good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Quagliata, and I'm one of the pastors here at the Bridge Church. It's my joy to welcome you today to our Bridge Church online worship experience. Some of you are watching live at 10:30, and if you are, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a word that says connect. If you would click on that at some point, let us know that you're with us today. We'd love the opportunity to extend a more personal welcome to you later on this week. I know some of you are watching after the fact, or you may be watching at our YouTube channel. Would you do me a favor? Visit thebridgeli.com when you're done watching today, and right on our front page, you'll see a blue and white bar that says connect on it. We'd love the opportunity just to thank you for being here, to let you know what's going on in the life of our church, to answer any questions that you might have. And also, you can connect in groups there. You can get prayer requests submitted there. We'd love to be praying for you and be praying with you. Anything you need to know about what's going on in the life of our church, you can find on our web page, thebridgeli.com. Otherwise, I invite you to worship with us today. I pray that today is a blessing to you and to your family.
Stay steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. And hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never failing. steadfast, my soul. He's in the waiting. He's in the waiting. And hold on to your hope as your triumph unfolds. He's never failing. He's never
Won't forget the wonder of how you brought deliverance, the exodus of my heart. 'Cause you found me, you freed me, held back the waters for my release. Oh Yahweh, 'cause you're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh. led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
One of the things that we so enjoy doing at the Bridge is practicing generosity. As I look back over the history of this church, far before me even, we can see the hand of God moving in and through this church in mighty, mighty ways. Pastors have been raised up, leaders have been raised up, people have been sent out to the mission field to bring a message of hope. We've supported ministries and missions all over New York and Long Island and even around the world. All of that is made possible because of folks like you and others who say, you know what, God, I want to practice generosity. I want to practice the principle of sowing into what you're doing, and you take that and use it to change somebody's life. That's happened in the life of this church for almost 70 years. 70 years. That's a long time. And I believe for the next 70 and 70 after that, unless the Lord returns, this church is going to continue bringing the life-changing message of Jesus to Malvern, to Long Island, and around the world. You and I have an opportunity to invest what God's given to us into that effort of building bridges that continually connect people to God and connect them to each other. I'd like to invite you today to practice generosity by giving to what God is doing in and through the Bridge Church. There's a few ways that you can do that. First, you can text bridge-give, don't forget the dash, bridge-give to 77948, and we'll walk you through it that way. If you're watching after the fact, you can visit our website, thebridgeli.com, and click on the giving link there, and you can give that way. When all else fails, if you'd like to drop something off, you can visit our 270 Franklin Avenue location, and there's a drop box there on the door if you'd like to give that way. But I invite you today to be a part of what God is doing by practicing generosity here at the Bridge Church. I'm excited today to introduce to you our speaker this morning. Just about 10 years ago, when the process began for me to begin exploring what God was doing in my life, I was connecting with people like Pastor Art Alexander, and he was connecting me with people, and the process was kind of continuing throughout 2011. And then I was told that I was going to have a conversation with one of the folks on the search team, and his name is Dave Howard. I remember that conversation. I remember talking to him. I remember some of the questions that he asked me, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm really looking forward to having time with him. Over the last 9 years, Dave and I have built a friendship. He has served on our board for many of those 9 years, with the exception of a brief stint that brought he and his family down to Florida. He is a really remarkable man. Dave graduated from Dartmouth College and then went on to Fordham, where he earned his law degree. And following that, he worked for a little-known sports organization you may have heard of here in New York, the New York Mets. Over 2 decades serving the Mets, ending his time there as the executive vice president of business affairs. Following the Mets, he went on to be the president and CEO of Madison Square Garden Sports. After serving a season there, his travels brought him down to Florida, where he was the CEO of a train line that was connecting cities in the south part of Florida for business travel and recreation travel and whatnot like that. And then eventually his travels would bring he and his wife back here to the New York area. And today he works for a company called Epic Select. And he assists folks, athletes and whatnot in the sports industry with all sorts of needs around insurance and investing and things like that. It's an impressive resume when you think about it. Dave is a leader of leaders, professional, successful in so many ways. But I have to tell you something. All of what I just mentioned to you does not define Dave Howard. You see, the man that I have known for 9 years, who I love dearly, his number one passion, the thing that drives him, is his love for Jesus Christ. This is a man who has put the Lord first in every area of his life. Second to that is his love for his family, his wife Nancy, and their 4 children. Dave is a man after God's own heart. He loves the Lord, he loves his family, and he loves this church. Today, we're going to continue our series on adversity. What do we do when adversity comes? What do we do when things are outside of our control? And Dave Howard has a tremendous story of God's hand and God's faithfulness to share with you today. Let's give a warm welcome to Dave Howard.
Hello, everybody. It is good to be with you, and it's an honor to share my story over the last 2 years today. When you think about it, God is not limited by time and space, so even though we're meeting virtually, I'm convinced that the Holy Spirit is still with us, because Jesus said when 2 or more are gathered in his name, he is there. So we welcome him today. This story has been something that I've been prompted a few times to tell. First time was earlier this year, when we were still gathering together, and it was probably in January, maybe February. I was speaking with Mike Lodespoto after service, and Mike knew what I had been through, what I was going through, and he asked me how I was doing, and I said, I'm doing great. Miracles have happened. And Mike said, Dave, the church needs to hear your story. And I thought about that, and obviously I would have been honored and happy to tell it at any time. But looking back now, I realized the story wasn't complete at that point. And then Pastor Joe, more recently, who was literally with me through the journey, he told me that the Lord had put on his heart to do a series on adversity. And he said that he wanted to have me speak on the last of the 4 Sundays about my journey through adversity. And obviously, as I said, I'm honored to do it. As I said, it's been about 2 years now. And it was a major test that has become a testimony. To start off, I have a question for you, and I'll do this by show of hands, even though you're sitting in front of a screen somewhere. But here's the question. Who can say that their experience in the year 2020 is a lot better than 2019? Who among you can say that, or know of someone who can say that? I have a feeling that is a really, really small number. But I can say that. And I say that in a way that it is actually not even close, that 2020 has been remarkably better than my experience in 2019. What does Jesus say about adversity in this world? In the Gospel of John, Jesus said, and I love when we start with Jesus said, because Jesus is himself the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and Word was with God, and the Word was God. He is the Word. So when he speaks the Word, it's even that much more profound. And what he said to his followers, to us, is that in this world, you will have trouble. Another word for that is tribulation. And by the way, he didn't say you might. He didn't say there's a good chance. He said in this world, this fallen world, you will have trouble. But take heart. But take courage. I took a class in college called it was philosophy of argument, and we would parse out sentences, and that word but in this class, they described it as a discount. They called it a discount word. And the reason it's a discount word, because when you see but in a sentence or two, it discounts what comes before it, and it emphasizes what comes after it. So Jesus said, in this world you have trouble or tribulation, but take heart, exclamation point, or but take courage. He's excited about this. For I have overcome the world. He has overcome the world. He has overcome our challenges and difficulties, and he's with us, and he loves us, and he will never leave us. That is the hope that we have. My story starts actually to give you a little background, about 9 years ago, in a blood test I had. My doctor, my internal doctor, is a little bit of an alarmist, so he adds a lot of things to the test. And we found the evidence of this M-spike protein in the blood. And M-spike protein is actually the marker for multiple myeloma. And I had no symptoms whatsoever, and it was really like a surprise, and it was really coincidental. It wasn't like we were looking for it. What happens with multiple myeloma, it's a type of blood cancer, and it's in the bone marrow. And in the bone marrow, you have white blood cells and red blood cells. And some of the white blood cells are called plasma cells, and they're really important cells for our immune system because they produce the antibodies that fights infection and virus and disease. With the cancer multiple myeloma, what happens is some of these plasma cells are produced and they're abnormal. And they don't produce antibodies, they produce this protein called a monoclonal protein. So that's the M-spike protein that is evidence in the blood. And the problem with this abnormal plasma cell condition is, whereas the good plasma cells produce the antibodies, then the plasma cells die, and then they new ones are generated. These abnormal ones don't die, and they produce this. They don't produce any antibodies, and they stick around in your bone marrow, and they crowd out the good stuff. And so over time, it causes some significant complications. And but I didn't have it at a high level. We actually did a bone marrow biopsy, and it was negative. There was no myeloma. So, I had no symptoms. There was no change. I would get checked every year or so. And we were just going on. My doctor told me more than likely it's called an MGUS, which is a benign condition, monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. And he said some people have it and don't even know they have it, and they just live the rest of their lives with it. But I asked the oncologist, what's the chance of this becoming myeloma? And he said I would give it about a 50-50 chance. And that seemed a little high, but I kept going on, kept getting checked. After a while, I stopped actually getting checked because there was no change. We moved to Florida in 2017. I got a new internal medicine doctor down there. He got my records from New York. He saw the records on the M spike protein, and he said, you should get this checked again down here, and he referred me to a hematologist, oncologist down there. Had that blood test in June of 2018. He said there was no change from the last time I had the test, which was in 2016, but he said it's at a level that he would characterize as smoldering myeloma, so it's not quite MGUS. And so I asked him, okay, what's the risk of that becoming something? And he said, well, the data says that once this is discovered, you have a 3% chance of it becoming multiple myeloma, and it increases 3% a year every year thereafter. So I did a quick math, and I said, okay, this has been about 7 years. So right now I'm at a 21% level of getting it, and I figure that's still pretty low. And actually, I felt pretty good about my chances. And the next blood test was scheduled for 6 months, which is going to be in December. So, we moved forward, and but what was happening actually about 2 years ago, in October of that year, I started experiencing very severe back pain in particular, spinal pain, lower back, and I had some strange rib cage pain and phenomenon. A couple times I would lean over and pick something up, and if an armrest of a chair or a couch would hit my rib cage and I would put some pressure on it, I would get this electric bolt of pain throughout my torso. The first time it happened, I actually jumped back, and I actually thought I was electrocuted. I didn't have any idea what this was. The back pain was getting more and more severe and was starting to limit my ability to do things. We had a series of family weddings in the fall of 2018, including our oldest son, Matt, in November. And I was having trouble being on my feet for any period of time, and I was having trouble dancing. I actually have some pretty good moves, but I was really limited. I started doing a little research and checking out these symptoms, and I saw that it might be the onset of multiple myeloma, but I already had a blood test scheduled for December, so I didn't really call the doctor or do anything. But I do recall that the kids were skiing over the holidays that year, and I had no chance to ski with them. My back would not allow it. The December blood test came back. Doctor called me and he said, your M spike protein is slightly elevated from June. He said, I'm not overly alarmed, but we should do a blood test. I was up in New York. I was going to be going back to Florida after Christmas, after the New Year. We scheduled the biopsy, the bone marrow biopsy, for my birthday, actually, January 4th of 2019. That was quite a auspicious start to a year of essentially pain and distress. Biopsy itself was far and away the worst biopsy I've ever had. It was actually a barbaric biopsy. Usually these are done by clinical nurses that are compassionate, empathetic, and they take their time and they use some anesthesia, and this was done by a surgeon who clearly felt this was beneath him. They got me ready. They gave me a topical Novocaine shot, and he came in. And this procedure is they essentially have to drill into your hip bone to get into the marrow, and then they extract marrow from it. It's not pleasant. He took no time to limit my discomfort. He bore into my hip. I hear every time they do it how dense my bones are. This guy bore into it. My back was in full spasm at this point. And when they withdraw the marrow, it's also an unpleasant feeling. So in any event, it was the start of a series of painful and distressing experiences I'll be having over the course of the year. Diagnosis came back. That was a Friday. On the following Monday, I met with the doctor. He said, the result of the biopsy is that you have multiple myeloma, and it is an aggressive case of myeloma. he said to us, he actually did his residency up here in New York City, and he said, there's only 2 hospitals in Florida that I would even recommend for possible treatment. And he said, my recommendation to you is if you can get into a clinical trial at a New York City hospital, that would be, I think, the best course of action. But we still had, we did a series of tests down there, PET scan, CT scan, a full body MRI that took 3 hours. I wasn't claustrophobic before that MRI. I kind of became claustrophobic about 2.5 hours in to that. And by the way, every one of these tests, my back would be in spasm, the pain to get in and out of the machines. The pain was increasing by the day. What was going on is this cancer was attacking my vertebrae, and it was creating microfractures in my vertebrae. And the pain was getting, and I was on pain medication, fentanyl, morphine, didn't really do anything. I collapsed on our stairway in our home on 3 occasions. It got to the point within a couple of weeks of this diagnosis that I couldn't walk anymore without help. And so I got this, Nancy, my wife, God bless her, she saw this kind of sleek looking walker, and she knew that I wasn't gonna live with sort of that, brushed aluminum with the tennis balls on the back. So she got me this sleek walker, and it was a godsend. And as I'm going to my visits, you can imagine in South Florida, when you go to a cancer center, the average age is, probably well into the 70s. And I was getting a lot of compliments from a lot of senior ladies about how nice my walker was. It was pretty funny, and I would lean over to Nancy and I said, it's not really the walker. I think they're actually hitting on me, but it was nice to have a little humor, a little break in the process. But we had to get to New York, and so while I dreaded telling the kids this news, we did call our son Matt and his wife Lauren, our daughter-in-law. Lauren, God bless her, is an amazing young lady. She is the director of operations at the Weill Cornell Medical Center, and she was an angel. So we told them what was going on, and we asked Lauren to help us get into each of the Weill Cornell and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centers, and she set up meetings with the leaders of the myeloma treatment groups for each of those hospitals for late January. And we came up with Shay, our dog. Our daughter Emily, we had sold the house in Rockville Center the year before. When we went to Florida, our daughter Emily, Nancy felt we had kind of sold the house from under her because she was still in college, and she got a job, and she was coming back home, and we helped get her an apartment in Rockville Center in the Avalon, and she was there. She moved in September, and here we are in late January. We're coming down, and we're basically crashing in her apartment and pushing her out into the living room. And but we had these meetings first with Dr. Nowitzki at Weill Cornell on a Thursday, and he was amazing. And then we met on Monday with Dr. Lenby, who at that time was heading up the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center's myeloma unit. And the pain was getting to the point where it was totally debilitating. The trip into the city, when we would hit a pothole, the pain would be astronomical. You think about driving in New York and trying to avoid potholes. And what I would do is when I would see a pothole, I literally would push against the floorboard, and I would push myself off the seat and push myself against the seat back so I didn't feel the impact of the bump. As a matter of fact, when we were meeting with Dr. Lenby on that Monday, she said she had an ideal clinical trial that she thought would be ideal for me. She said it's a combination of 4 chemo drugs. 3 would be by intravenous, 1 is by pill. One of them is typically only given for a recurrence due to its strength, but also due to its risk of harmful side effects. But in this trial, they're including that drug in the initial trial. And she said, because your case is so aggressive, I think this would be an ideal trial for you. And as she was sketching out a flow chart and showing how this was all going to happen, she looked at me and she could see that I couldn't even follow her because of the pain. And she said to me, I have to admit you, I can't let you leave because you're in so much pain. We have to get you stabilized. And I will say that began the worst week of my life. The physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual distress was off the charts. Again, they had me going through a series they were redoing a lot of the tests that we had done in Florida. I was on a lot of pain medication, again, fentanyl. They added Dilaudid to my pain cocktail. I would wake up at night not knowing where I was. I had difficulty distinguishing dreams from consciousness. The room, when I would wake up, it sort of had this green glow, and I couldn't turn, so I didn't know where that green light was coming from. It might have been from the equipment and the readouts. It might have been coming in from the city and the windows, but it added to this odd reality. And then every time I'd wake up and I'd not know where I was, and then I would think about it, then I remember where I was, and then I would remember, oh yeah, you have cancer, and you're in the hospital, and it was difficult, to say the least. And my wife, God bless her, she went to work and connected a lot of the spiritual leaders in my life, and she started a text to keep them apprised of what was happening, and they obviously went to work as prayer warriors. And Pastor Joe was one of those prayer warriors, and he came to visit me that week. I think it was on Wednesday, and told me that he's been praying for me, and that in his prayer for me, the Lord answered him with a very clear statement, and the statement was, "He is in my hands. He is in my hands." I needed that assurance at that moment more than anything I needed in my life, and it brings to mind this verse from Isaiah, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Rather remarkably, as I was getting that assurance of hope that I was in God's hands, Nancy was receiving a call from Dr. Lenvi to say that the committee at Memorial Sloan Kettering had rejected me for the clinical trial. And Dr. Lenvi said the committee felt that my condition was too advanced and I was too far along. And so basically in their view, I was not a hopeful case. And Dr. Lenvi told Nancy that she was going to fight for me because she felt that I was an ideal patient for this clinical trial. And Nancy didn't tell me about that call. God bless her. Here was the amazing thing, though, for the rest of that week after Pastor Joe visited me and told me that God said that I was in his hands. As I was going to meet these world-class doctors, or as they were coming to see me, a lot of times, their visit or my visit with them would be preceded by, a nurse or a resident being with me. And it was incredible. Almost every time, I think every time after Joe came, they would say the same thing to me: "You're in good hands. You're in good hands." And they were suggesting that doctor is awesome and I'm in good hands. And I would say, "Yes, I know." Every time. "Yes, I know. I am in good hands." One of those doctors his name was Dr. Liss, and he's a spinal surgeon, and he performs a a procedure called a kyphoplasty. Kyphoplasty is a procedure where they use X-ray guided instrumentation to inject cement into your vertebrae, these fractures that I had in my vertebrae, and to reinforce them and give you a better chance to get off using things like this walker. And when he came to visit me, he appeared at the door, again, one of these you're in good hands moments, and he said, "Hi, Dave, I'm the cement guy from New Jersey." And I knew I was going to like Dr. Liss. Dr. Liss is one of the best in the world at what he does. He's done it for really significant people over the course of his career, including, from what I learned in reading his book, Tom Brokaw, when he was diagnosed with, he had performed this kyphoplasty for him, and he did it. Ultimately, I had 7 vertebrae done in my lumbar, in my lower back section, and he said that I could have used more, but he said it was beyond really the going any further would have been unsafe. As it was, I had a little bit of a challenge coming out of anesthesia. Apparently, I don't remember this, but they asked me where I lived, and I said Farmingdale. I hadn't lived in Farmingdale since I was 18 years old, and then Nancy came in, and I didn't recognize Nancy. The one thing I do remember, actually, the first thing I remember, is they asked me who the president was, and I happened to know that. And then I sort of started coming out, and I recognized Nancy, fortunately. That was a Thursday of that week, I believe, maybe Friday. No, it was Thursday night. And I remember, at that point, I was pretty well stabilized, although the pain was pretty still significant. But we asked the doctor, when can I go home? And he said, listen, you can go home in a couple of days. You're very limited, obviously. He said when I go home at that point, I couldn't lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. And so the plan was I was going to go home Super Bowl Sunday. And I do remember that Sunday morning, the nurse came in early, 5:30 or so, and said, I hear you're going home today? And she was a little dubious, a little incredulous that I was going home. And I said, yeah, that's the plan. She said, well, why don't you try and get out of bed? And I couldn't get out of bed. And that's the hospital bed where, it was kind of, I put my leg, they would lift me up and I couldn't stand up. The pain was astronomical. Nancy arrives, I don't know, about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and she was amazing. Every time she'd come in, she'd be positive and, okay, let's go. And the nurse was looking at me and I'm like, okay, let's go. Fortunately, I was able to get out of bed and able to get home. And it was good to be home. It definitely helped me emotionally and spiritually, especially. The pain was still very significant. Probably the worst thing was just getting out of bed in the morning. So painful just to get into a seated position off the side of the bed. So painful that I would scream. I couldn't help it. I would scream at the top of my lungs every morning just to get out of bed. And once I was seated at the side of the bed, I then had to stand up with a little help from the walker. And every time I would do that, I would look up and I would pray to God for help. And by the way, I haven't even started treatment yet, but treatment would start because Nancy did get a call later in the week from Dr. Lenvi that with her persistence, she prevailed upon the committee to get me into the trial. And so this trial started, and it was quite an adjustment. The first couple of sessions of infusion, it would take about 6 or 7 hours because they were very slow and deliberate with some steroids to minimize the reaction and just a slow intro of these very, very powerful drugs to my system. And so the first couple of weeks, they were long days. It was 1 day a week for 3 weeks and taking a pill every day for 3 weeks and then 1 week off. That's a cycle. The impact, the effect, nausea, loss of appetite, constipation from the pain meds coupled with diarrhea from the treatment. So, choose your poison there. The discomfort scale was off the charts. It was really important to hydrate because all these drugs are processed through your kidneys. So it's really, really important to hyperhydrate. But what was happening is I'd go to drink water and I couldn't swallow. I couldn't drink, just have water and swallow it. So the only way I could do it is with a straw. So I I was doing that as best I could. And during that first cycle, actually, probably the first miracle was getting into the trial. The second more significant miracle, I think, or equally significant, was I had I'm sorry for the graphic, but I had a really, really severe case of diarrhea one evening. It started around 11 o'clock. Again, I'm early. I would later realize that when you have any of these severe symptoms, you've got to call. They're available 24/7. Call them, because they'll advise you. More than likely, they'll tell you to come in, and they'll treat it. This was my first one. I'm like, it's late. I don't want to bother anybody. I had this very severe diarrhea for probably about 4 or 5 hours. I knew I was getting dehydrated. I was trying my best to drink as much water as I could. Lo and behold, first thing the next morning, one of the clinical research nurses calls and says, hey, we want you to go over to the clinic at Mercy Hospital and get a blood test. I go to get the blood test. She calls me back early afternoon, and she says, and she's very pleasant and not alarmed, seemingly to me. And she said, we got the results back, and your creatinine level is a little high, and so we want you to come in for some further tests in the city. So we were on our way into the city. Creatinine is something that appears in your blood when your kidney function is not doing well. And she understated how high it was. It was very high. It was alarmingly high. And I get into their urgent care facility, and the chief resident came over to see me, and he said, Mr. Howard, I want to tell you that when we see patients with creatinine levels this high, they don't usually come down. He said there's almost nothing we can do to make them come down. And he said, we're going to take another test now, and we'll check where it is, but I just want to prepare you for that. And what he's saying is, I want to prepare you that you may have to come off treatment because your kidneys could be failing. I said, okay. He comes back in about 20 minutes, and he says, well, you might be proving me a liar because this has come down a little bit. He said, it's still high, though, so I want to keep you here overnight. For observation. We'll keep you on an IV, and we'll check you periodically. So I said, yeah, obviously. Now I'm staying overnight in an urgent care, and I'm essentially on a gurney with my back pain, so I didn't sleep much. And here's the miracle. By morning, my creatinine level was normal. The nurse who was with me overnight came to me, and she said, I've been here for 20 years, and I've never seen this. I have never seen this. So before we began every cycle of treatment, we would meet with Dr. Lenvi. And after the first 2 cycles, I was really down. I felt awful, couldn't eat, losing a lot of weight, and I was pretty dejected. Still using the walker to get around, and we went in to meet with her. And she could see that I was down, and she said, by the way, she was a pretty stoic person, but she saw me and she said, you should be encouraged. You should be encouraged. Have you seen your numbers? And I said, I had, and she showed me the graph. As you can see, the graph from those first 2, this is the graph of my M-spike protein in my blood. It had come down pretty significantly. Again, it was in the alarmingly high stage, still high, but definitely going in the right direction. So, the good news there was the treatment was working, despite the challenges, the fatigue and the appetite, but it was working, and that was encouraging. That was encouraging. Other encouraging things that happened were a couple of positive visits. One was, as you start this treatment, what it does, it affects your bones, and it kind of makes your bones brittle. And the bone that gets most affected by it is actually your mandible, your lower jaw bone. And the big issue there is if you have any type of dental issue during treatment, they can't do anything about it. because your bone is so brittle. So they want you actually, they have a dentist. They have dentists on staff at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they had me scheduled to meet with a dentist, and his name was Dr. Joe Randazzo. Joe Randazzo, my mother's maiden name is Maria Randazzo. Her brother, my Uncle Joe, is my favorite uncle in the world, so I thought it was really cool that this doctor had the same name as my favorite uncle. And we go in to see him, and before he does anything, he asks how we're doing. And we said, we're doing okay. We have a challenge, but we have faith in God, and we're confident that God's going to see us through. And he was a Christian, and we started talking as brothers and a sister in Christ. And he actually, before he examined me, he said, "Can I pray for you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he had this most amazing prayer. It was so cool. The other thing was my follow-up visit with Dr. List, the cement guy from New Jersey. It was 90 days after the procedure. It was in April, late April. I think at that point I had graduated from the walker. I think I was using the cane. By the way, I didn't get any compliments on the cane, but I was doing a little better, and we were waiting for him to come into the examining room, and I was sitting in a chair, and he walked in again, and he said to me, he looked at me and he said, "Stand up." And I just stood up. And he said, "Wow, you're doing great." He said, "In the hospital, if I would have told you to stand up, I could have left the room, gone and got a cup of coffee, had a conversation. I would have come back, and you would have been still working on getting up." He said, "You're doing great." He said, "At this point, I don't need to see you again." He said, "Don't, again, be limited, 10 pounds. Don't lift any more than 10 pounds for the time being. But after another 2 or 3 months, you can gradually increase your activity," which was awesome, very encouraging. I did have 2 other emergency visits. One was in the 3rd cycle. I had a shortness of breath, and again, happened to be late at night, around midnight. I just could not. The risk there is one of the drugs, Revlimid, the pill, can cause clots, and the clots could either cause a stroke, or they could, if they go into your lung, they could be a pulmonary embolism, which could be fatal, and shortness of breath could be one of the signs of that. So we went to the emergency room. They kept me overnight, put me on oxygen. By the morning, I was fine. They couldn't find anything. The 4th visit was another issue. Side effect was profuse sweating, which also could be a sign of heart-related failures. I sweat through, literally that day, I sweat through 3 full sets of clothing, and I couldn't stop it. We went in again and got on some IV and got through that. But things were continuing to go well, and the response to the treatment continued to be positive. My M-spike protein level continued to drop, and now the doctors had to take a look at what they were going to do about taking me off so they can harvest my own stem cells for a possible transplant. They decided to do it after the 5th cycle, and this is where I stood just as they were about to take me off of treatment for 2 months to do the stem cell harvest, and I was in good shape. The trend line was still good. It was still going down from treatment to treatment. And I was off for almost 2 months to do this harvest. As much as it was good to be off of treatment, the harvest process had its own challenges, including self-administered shots in my abdomen every morning for a month, and pills to release the stem cells for the harvest that would be taken out of a chest port. And these pills would create the worst feeling of restlessness you could imagine. I hardly slept for the nights of the 2 days that we were doing the harvest. Unfortunately, we got enough cells in the 2 days I didn't need to do a 3rd day. So returning to treatment in August, I met with the doctor. They took the blood test. The doctor told me, "Listen, don't be alarmed if your M-spike protein level has gone up a little bit, because you haven't been on treatment for almost a couple of months now." And 2 days after that test, I got a call from, again, one of the research nurses. And I could sense there was a little excitement. She said, Dave, we got your blood work back. She said, it's good news, because usually if they call, it's one or the other. It's either good or bad. She said, it's good news. Your M-spike protein went to 0 while you were off treatment. Went to 0 while I was off treatment. They couldn't explain it. That's a miracle. And when you look at the slope, it was starting to flatten out there a little bit, and then I'm on treatment, and you look at a pretty stark, drop right to 0. So I asked, what does that mean? I figured maybe we're done with treatment. Do we go back and finish the last 3 months? And she said, no, we're gonna do that, and we did it. And after that was completed, again, there was time for yet another bone marrow biopsy. And this one, the results were, again, remarkable. They found only 16 myeloma cells out of a sample size of 5.4 million. As a percentage, that is 0.0003%. And in the report, I love the way they write these things in medical reports. The report says, which is below the limit of accurate quantitation. What they're basically saying, it's functionally 0. The doctor said 5 years ago, the report would have said 0 because they didn't have that level of sensitivity. They didn't have that large a sample size. But because it wasn't actually 0, she said, you have a choice between the stem cell transplant and then going on medical maintenance. Medical maintenance would be the pill that I was on, Revlimid. I would continue just to take that. No more intravenous infusion therapy, and it would be a lower dose. But it was my choice. She said you could do either one. You'll stay in the trial, either one. My wife, God bless her. This now was Dr. Lenvi had left, actually, to go into full-time research, but she said that she thinks they're close to a cure, and she wants to be part of that effort. And she handpicked this doctor for me, the new doctor, who, Dr. Shah is her name. She's an amazing doctor. Part of the amazing thing about it is when she was in residency, she had lymphoma. So she is a cancer survivor herself. So she is the ultimate empathetic doctor. And when she was explaining these two options, Nancy asked her, Dr. Shah, what would you do if it were you? And Dr. Shah would say, we're really not supposed to answer that question. But ultimately she said, if it were me, I would do the medical maintenance. And I had a neighbor in Rockville Center who was about 4 years ahead of me in this process. And I spoke with him, and he was in a clinical trial, but his group was doing the maintenance, but he could have chosen the stem cell transplant. He said, Dave, I didn't want to do the transplant. I was afraid of it. And Pastor Dan, I was speaking with him and sharing with him the options, and Pastor Dan asked me, he said, so tell me, you could do this transplant like later on, right? I said, yeah, they're going to keep the cells in storage, so I could do it later. He said, then it's easy. He said, it's obvious, bro. Go with the medical maintenance. And I'm thinking, yeah, it really is easy. But my sort of macho attitude was, let's drive this thing into the ground. Let's really knock it out. But the implications of the transplant are really significant, really significant. They give you a dose of chemo that literally strips your body of all of your immunities. And it has to do that. Otherwise, your body would not accept, even though they're your own stem cells, it wouldn't even accept your own stem cells. But because of that, you have to be literally in a bubble. For that first month, you have to either be in the hospital or in a hospital-like setting in an apartment across the street from the hospital in the city. The only person who could be with me was Nancy for that month. And then for the next 3 or 4 months, I was very limited as what I could do. I was extremely immune compromised in that period. When you think about the timing, this would have happened in January of this year. Think about being totally immune deficient for the month of January, just as COVID is hitting us, and then being severely immune compromised for the next 3 to 4 months. And the other thing was he said I couldn't be around my dog, which was another negative. But it would have been the worst timing in the history of medicine if I had done the transplant. Fortunately, we did the medical maintenance. There was safety in a multitude of counselors, and God definitely made a straight path for me. I've been on medical maintenance all year in 2020. I'm feeling better and better. My energy is back. I skied with the kids back in February. I think all of us wondered whether I could actually do it, and I'm amazed I was able to do it. I'm back to cycling, able to exercise. I'm off of all pain meds, all sleep meds. I have no limitations on my activity. I actually played golf several times over the last month or so. I hadn't played golf in 2.5 years. Again, I was cautious as to whether I could even do that, but my back actually feels better than it has in years, even before the diagnosis. And then in February, the same week in February, I get job offers, 2 contracts arrive in the same week in February. And looking back at that, that was perfect timing. I mean, that was really at the point where I was back to full energy and I would be able to work a full day. And I accepted one of those job offers, and the other one I'm actually consulting on. And all is really going extraordinarily well. In October, earlier this month, well, now it's November, but early last month, I had my annual test, another bone marrow biopsy. And the M-spike protein remains 0, as you can see in this slide. It is flat 0 ever since it went to 0 when I was off treatment last summer. And the bone marrow biopsy continues to be a minute trace, basically 0 in my bone marrow. So I am a walking testimony without even a sleek walker. When people who had heard what I was going through see me, now, and they ask how they're doing, they hear, by the grace and mercy of God, I'm doing and feeling great, with several miracles along the way. And those, even people who didn't know what I was dealing with, when they see me, a lot of times they hear, wow, you look great and you lost a lot of weight. And I say, well, I say to that, thanks, and I don't recommend the diet. But there is a benefit of dealing with adversity when we are in Christ. In Romans chapter 5, this speaks exactly to what I was dealing with, and I think it speaks to what we are all experiencing in 2020, whatever it may be. We are going through troubles and tribulations. In this local church, our pastor has been called to another church. That's a challenge for us. This is an amazing summary of the benefit of adversity in Jesus. We also exult in our tribulations. Exult, the word exult there means to feel or show triumphant elation or jubilation. That is, so an exultant tribulation is an oxymoron. When I think of the word exult, I think of a sports, setting, and something great has happened. And probably in my experience, the greatest moment like that was the first game back at Shea Stadium after 9/11, when Mike Piazza hits a home run in the bottom of the 8th inning to give us the lead. We ultimately win the game. The moment that ball goes out, it actually hit the camera platform in center field. The reaction of the whole stadium was this, right? Everyone stood up, the arms went up, and they screamed. That is a picture of exulting. We also exult in our tribulations. We exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. That is a summary of my experience in the last 2 years. And that is the promise that we all have for the tribulation, the trouble that we will experience in this world. But we should be encouraged. We should take heart. We should take courage that Jesus has overcome the world. Let me close in a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you Thank you that I have this walker up here as a prop and this cane as a prop, and I don't need them anymore. I give you all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise for this story and the testimony that you have given me. I indeed was in your hands from the outset, just as you hold all of us individually, collectively, in your hands. Your love, mercy, grace, faithfulness are amazing. They are beyond our comprehension. We just say thank you. We ask you to remind us all to take heart and take courage in our tribulations, and that we should exult in them, because you will produce in us perseverance, proven character, and a hope that will not disappoint through your love being poured out within our hearts. And we pray in the matchless name of our Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for
It is well.
I just want to thank you again so much for being with us today. I am sure that today was a blessing to you. I hope it encouraged you. I hope it challenged you, but I hope more than anything it gave you hope. The hope of knowing that there is no better place for you and I to be than in the palm of God's hand. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, I just want to let you know a couple of things that are going on in the life of our church that we want you to be aware of. First of all, we are collecting food for the Belmont Chaplaincy Racetrack Ministry. If you'd like to be a part of that, on Sunday, November 15th, we're going to be bringing boxes of pancake mix and syrup to be a blessing food-wise to the folks that work on the backstretch, the not-so-glamorous part of Belmont. Our own two pastors, Umberto and Karen Chavez, serve that ministry faithfully day in and day out, week after week. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, you can visit thebridgeli.com to learn more. The other thing that we're going to be a part of this year, which we've been a part of every year, at least for my time here, if not even before, is Operation Christmas Child. Every year we put these green and red boxes together. We put toys and school supplies and all kinds of things in them, and they get packed up and they get sent all around the world to children who otherwise would not have a Christmas like maybe you and I get to have. But I have to tell you, the most important thing that goes in those boxes is the message of Jesus, the message of the gospel. I want to encourage you, if you're watching online today and you're not here, why don't you make it a point to call the church office, 516-561-8101, and ask somebody how you can get a hold of one of these boxes. We have them right here in the building. We'd be happy to help you get one of those so that in November, toward the end of the month, when we collect those boxes, you can be a part of that as well. Before we go today, let me give you a blessing and we'll be on our way. I pray that the Lord would bless you and keep you. I pray that the Lord would make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. I pray that the Lord would look upon you with his favor and give you his peace that passes all understanding, and that would guard your heart and guard your mind in Christ Jesus. God bless you, everybody. Have a great week.